Hey, I am Al Letson, host of Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting at PRX. And I am a huge comic book fan, which is why it makes me so happy to be here with you at the New York Comic Con online because of COVID, unfortunately. But I am happy to say that I am here with one of my best friends in the entire universe, Mr. Glynn Washington with the crazy nose. Glynn, what is up with the nose?
Hello, New York Comic Con. This is a nose that I like. Check this out. This is about Spooked, and this is one of the scariest outfits I could get in the house without leaving the house for this COVID. There's nothing scarier than COVID.
I don't know. That mask is pretty bad. It's pretty scary. And with us today is Lopak. Lopak, please introduce yourself.
Hey, aloha. I'm Lopaka Kapanui, coming to you all the way from the sunny islands of Hawaii. We're on the pandemic shutdown, so no one in my house is losing weight.
I actually wish that I was on lockdown in paradise. That would be far preferable to a lot of other places. So, Glynn, tell me, how did the idea for Spooked come up? Let's just set the stage here. Like, you have a successful podcast broadcast show called Snap Judgment, which you've been doing for, I think Snap Judgment is about 10 years old now or close to it?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar, Snap Judgment is a storytelling show. We tell stories about all kinds of different things from a first-person perspective. Real people, real stories. And we were, it had to be around Halloween time, and we thought, you know what? Let's take this same approach and ask people about their supernatural experiences. Let me not get in the way of what their people's stories are. And it's been really amazing, the response to some of those stories. People, oftentimes will say, oh, well, is that not the serious journalism and this and that about it? But the truth of the matter is, these stories are stories that people, it determines who they marry, where they live, what they do for a living. These are the stories that people tell themselves about themselves, that make their own story. And so they're extremely important. The way that we interact with this sort of, with the unknown, with the veil, with the other side, it ends up being, it's not just those things that we can quantify oftentimes that are most important to how we live our lives. And so the response to that first Halloween episode was through the roof. And we kept doing these spook stories every year. One of our most popular Snap Judgment stories of the year would always be Spooked. And finally we thought, well, let's make a whole show of just these stories. Real people telling us the stories that maybe they don't want to tell everybody else. The stories, this is the whole thing about Spooked. It's like,
these are all real stories. They're not made up.
You can believe it or not believe it, but at least we want the person telling our stories to believe what they're telling us. These are the stories people say, look, man, you ain't gonna believe this, but, and that's that lean in moment is where Spooked lives. And the stories span every culture, every creed, every area of the world. Everyone has their own type of stories, of their own brush against the supernatural. It's like, and everyone has a little bit different way, I think, of looking beyond the veil. These stories oftentimes are the stories that help us with loss, that help us, there's this understanding, I think, to know what is that next bit mystery.
So give me an example of like two really different two really different spook stories. Because you say like everybody has a different way of looking beyond the veil. Can you give me like two examples of that?
Well, I certainly can. Let me tell you a story. When I was 3 years old, And let me take this off for a minute because this is for real. When I was 4 years old, I was in a bed with my little brother, who was 1 year younger than me. We're in Detroit, Michigan, and they put us to bed. And we're in the bed. And it's dark out, it's dark inside, and we look up, and there is a face. And there's a face that's looking at us. But it's kind of all I can say is a face in front of us, kind of floating in the air above us. Curious, like, and my family's known for its big heads, and this got a big head too. And it's just looking at us, and we're looking at it, and we're not scared. It wasn't a scary thing at all. And it was we actually talked to each other about it with that face. We're talking to it. It's not saying anything to us, but we're just, okay. I don't remember. I went to sleep essentially with this face hovering above me. And when I woke up the next morning with my brother, we go downstairs, and instead of my mother and my father there, it's my grandmother. And we're like, hey, Granny, what's going on? Where's Mama and Daddy at? Oh, they're gone, baby. They're gone. They'll be back. They'll be back. And eventually they did come back. They came back. My mother was really, really sad. Really, really, really sad. And I didn't understand the terminology that was being used in the house. I didn't know what's going on. But they said that we had lost a sibling, that we expected to have a little baby brother or sister, and that wasn't going to happen anymore. And I remember, like, again, we're little, we're tiny. Looking at my brother looking at me. And I think that whoever that was, that big head, whatever, looking at us that night, maybe stopped by on the way through just to say what's up. And it's a story that stuck with me for a long, 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 long time. I'll tell you another story. And that was when I was a kid. And you can dismiss kid stories. Kid stories, I'm sure that a lot of the stories that I come up with are probably because I was living in a lucid dream. You know this, Al, and Lopaka, you probably know this as well, that this is kids relate in a certain way to the world. But this story happened 5 years ago. And this was in downtown San Francisco at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And in San Francisco, there are trains, but the BART trains. And I had just taken a train to the Powell Street station. I was getting off at Powell. Powell is one of the busiest stations in San Francisco. I was going downtown. On the way from the train to the surface, I was on an escalator. I'm on an escalator, and I'm looking up, and minding my business. I got my bag. I got my little headphones on. I'm chilling. And I look up, and I see directly in front of me on the escalator, there's a person, and they have an army jacket on, just like my brother used to wear. And I'm like, that looks like my brother's army jacket. That's a trip. And I'm just looking at the jacket, and I look up at the jacket, and it has a patch on it. And this patch, I just know this patch is the same patch from my brother's army jacket. And there's no way anyone could have this. This is from a small bar in Tokyo where he used to live, where this patch came from. There's no way anyone's got this patch. No one, this patch on this jacket. And I'm like, how the hell did this fool get this? And I look up at the face, and I see my brother looking back at me, smiling. My brother who's passed. and I almost fall down the escalator. And when we get to the top, I'm looking around and I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone. I can't explain it. And I know, again, some people will say, well, you're dealing with grief. Well, maybe he's a little bit touched in the head. Anyway, and I'm not going to deny any of those things. All I can tell you is what I saw on that escalator. I saw my own eyes as a grown man in the middle of the day. And so these are the types of stories. In fact, Lopaka, you've got plenty of stories. Tell us a story, Lopaka.
I was about to ask Lopaka, how did you get involved with Spooked?
That's a long story. But I'll give you the short version is in 1994, we went on this ghost tour because we'd heard about it in downtown. And the second I got on a tour and I heard the gentleman start to speak, I realized that everything he said was everything I'd heard about or learned about growing up. And so instantly there was this connection. And by 1999, I was already his apprentice, taking over some of the tours. And he passed away in 2003. And I had to step in. His business partner still had money invested, so I had to keep it going. And by 2005, I just branched off on my own. I'll tell you honestly, I don't know how I came by the title Master Storyteller. It's just something everybody said, and then I finally got this certificate from the state of Hawaii earlier this year in March for my work in storytelling, and it says Master Storyteller. And so I think this pandemic, because I got it the day the pandemic happened in March in Hawaii. And I thought to myself initially, well, how's that? I get this certificate for Master Storyteller, and now I can't tell any stories because we're on lockdown. But when moments like that happen, either my mentor or my mom will come to me in a dream and basically, like my mom used to do, yank me by the ear. And that's exactly what happened that night. She appeared at my bedside, and I'm not sure if I was dreaming or what was happening, but she gently tugged my earlobe, and she says, "This is your test. Now go show everybody what a master storyteller is. You don't need a tour. You don't need an audience. Just do what you do." And this is 3:00 in the morning, and I realize I'm sitting on the side of my bed, and my wife wakes up and says, "What the hell are you doing? It's 3:00 in the morning." And I looked at her, I said, "My mom was here." And the second I said that, the entire room smelled like Vicks Vapor Rub. If you guys remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's my mom's smell. So that's one story, the short version.
Yeah. So give us a story that would work on Spooked.
Oh, the one that was on Spooked?
Yeah, please.
So that story has to do with myself being adopted at 3 months old. My biological mom couldn't take care of me. She was saddled down with 4 kids. I was the baby, living in an Oldsmobile station wagon behind a Puerto Rican bar in Honolulu. And she was too headstrong to go back to my grandpa and apologize. The two of them were exact personalities, which is probably why they didn't get along. And so my mom, during the day, worked as a clerk at an appliance warehouse, and she was friends with a guy who had just recently lost his own son. And so that's how the adoption happened. I'm not sure of the specifics, but one of the things my adopted father told my biological mom is once everything's legal, you can't see him anymore. You're no longer in his life. But early on, I started to get sick and had to go to the hospital. So they had to call her for the medical records. And I think it was after then, every opportunity my adopted father had, he would always remind me, "You're adopted. You're not my real son." And so when I go to parties or friends would come over or whatever event it was, he would introduce my 3 older brothers, my son Paul, my son Daniel Jr., my son Jimmy, and this is my adopted son.
God, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. And so by 6 or 7 years old, I was beginning to get sick. When I would go number one, blood would come out. I had to go to the hospital. There was no way around it. And while I was in the hospital, I befriended this kid, and I remember his name was Scotty Boyd. He's what we call a local Portuguese kid. So he had, big curly hair, Coke bottle glasses, and just happy all the time. And so we were constant companions in the hospital, and we get scoldings, for doing stuff we weren't supposed to do. And everybody knew who he was because he was in this commercial with his father singing this song in Hawaiian. And so he became like a local celebrity. So he was a big deal in the hospital. One evening, he was in his bed, and his family came, his doctors came, they're gathered around the bed, and they saw me, looking at what was going on, and they closed the curtains. And after a while, I can hear discussion, then I can hear people crying. And it's the kind of crying in Hawaii that we call kaniko. It's a crying that's so grief-stricken that, it just unnerves you. And then everybody left. Now, up until that time, my father's mother, who I called my Grandma Lucy, would come every day and just sit with me and talk. And this was in the evening. So after everybody leaves from Scotty's bed, because of the way the lighting was in that ward, that part of the hospital, I saw his silhouette sit up like this. And I saw him kick his feet this way and get off the bed. And then his shadow came around to my side of the curtain, and he started to say, friend, let's go play, friend. Come on, friend, let's play. Come on, friend. And so I kick my feet off the bed. I'm ready to hop off. And then from behind me, I hear my grandmother's voice, don't you get off that bed. And so I jumped and I turned around, and I was surprised to see her because she's only there during the day. And I said, why? That's my friend Scotty. I'm going to play with him. She says, no, don't you get off that bed. She said, you get off that bed, your feet touch the floor, you will never come back. And I told her, I don't understand. That's just my friend. I want to go play. She said, weren't you paying attention to what was happening? All those people crying. Your friend died. If you get off this bed and you go play with him, you'll never come back. She said, get back in bed and don't listen to the voice. And so pretty soon, it just stopped. Friend. And so once I got out of the hospital, I remember the day we were driving home, and my adopted mom was asking me questions about, what happened and all this stuff. And when I got home, they fed me my favorite foods, which I could eat at that time. And in our conversations, I just offhandedly happened to mention that, Grandma Lucy came every day and she would talk to me, and she told me some interesting stuff about her growing up. And I told him the story she told me about the boy she was in love with and how he drowned in the river, and how we have a volcano goddess here called Pele. She's the volcano goddess. I said, Grandma Lucy told me when she was a little girl, like the old Hawaiian woman came walking down the street asking people for water and food, and some would give, some wouldn't. And Grandma Lucy said the girl, the woman next door, when the old Hawaiian woman came to her house and asked for water or something to eat, that lady next door who lived, next to Grandma Lucy poured like hot boiling water on top of this old Hawaiian woman. And Grandma Lucy said nothing happened to her. Like she wasn't scalded or anything. She just walked around the front of the yard and came up to Grandma Lucy's house and asked Grandma Lucy's mom for anything she had. And Grandma Lucy's mom gave her sweet bread and some water. And then the woman said, that's okay. I don't need it. And she said, in 3 days, I'll be back. But before then, make sure you put a red flag in each corner of your property. You'll know. And I told them, and Grandma Lucy told me when 3 days later, the volcano erupted and the lava came toward their neighborhood, and it took the houses of the people that didn't give the old woman anything. But the people who gave her something, the lava went right around it. And so my father was dumbfounded because he said, "There's no way you could have known that. You know, nobody knows those stories. Nobody talks about it because, you know, they were heavy Roman Catholics." And so he asked me, you know, what did she wear when she came to visit you? I said it was a long mu'u. It had you know, little white flowers on it. It had a black background, and she wore these glasses with a funny looking string that came under the chin. Immediately he goes to the bedroom, and after a while he comes back out and he's holding something like this behind his back. And then he holds it up to me. He says, "Is this what she looked like?" I said, "Yeah, that's her." And that's when they revealed to me that while I was in the hospital, she'd actually passed away. And that the picture he showed me was the one that was at her services.
Wow. That's amazing. So Glynn, how do you find these amazing stories like this?
Here's the thing. Some people have amazing stories. But if someone has a story like Lopaka just told us, and this happens to him every Tuesday, you tend to be a little bit more skeptical. People who this stuff happens to, you know, you might have one or two, or maybe in my case, even a few, but you're looking for people who you believe they're telling you the truth, their own truth. Oftentimes, what I love best is when you have stories and everyone's telling you their version of the same thing that happened. When everyone saw the specter, the ghost, the monster, whatever it may be, when you have multiple people telling you the same version of the story. And so they are hard to find. And we have this amazing team of spookters led by Eliza Smith, and they just go through an amazing amount of stories. But now, because of the show has really just soared in popularity, what's incredible is that people now, they start sending us more stories. I probably get 20 different emails a day from someone saying, "This is what happened to me. This is what happened to me." And it's gotten to the point where, look, I don't want to hear about the time your grandmother saw a ghost. Everybody's granny saw a ghost. I'm looking for those relationships, those real connections, because I think our monsters, our demons, our ghosts, they tell us something about ourselves. And we're looking really for those. And that's the end. As you know, talk about master storytellers, Alex, and you're a master storyteller. And you know that in the end, all stories are almost always about the person telling them. Mm-hmm. And these stories especially, what are you afraid of? What do you want? What do you regret? What do you need? And what do you miss? This is almost at the heart of all of these stories from different cultures. Everyone has a different way of looking at it. Everyone has a different way of imagining what happens next. But those questions still keep coming up.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is since doing this on Spooked, I've got a lot of emails and voice messages and Facebook messages from grown men, you know, who share their story about their relationship with their father that, you know, pretty much had the same struggle, wanted to be accepted, wanting to be recognized, and, you know, getting nothing out of it. So I think one of the main purposes of stories like the ones you put out, Glynn, is it heals people. Yeah, and it causes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, even in a show like Spooked, which, you know, I think that people could think without hearing it first, because this is not what it is. But I think without hearing it first, people think that it's just, you know, for scares and to make you jump. But really, like, the stories are deep and about the human condition. Yes. That will also make you jump. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to go for the jump cut stuff and the stuff jumping out the closet. But most of the time, the world of the storyteller of Spooked It's not very different from the world that you live in. There might be one little thing that turns a little bit, but we don't have fiery demons jumping out the sink or whatever it's going to be. Nothing like that. We have people dealing with something they cannot explain, something that doesn't make any sense, something that doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't fit the rules that they thought that the world operated by. Mm-hmm. And that by itself, I just think that there is more mystery than we understand, that we give credit to. You don't have to believe anything to believe that there is mystery left, that there are things we don't understand, that there are energies that have impact on us. And again, you don't have to believe anything, but listen to these people and understand, and I think you'll feel it, especially some of the emotional tales like Lopaka will tell. This person's not lying to me. This person is telling me their truth. And there's a real power to that.
Yeah. So Glynn, if somebody wanted to, contribute to Spooked, how would they go about doing that?
They could send us a line, spooked@snapjudgment.org, spooked@snapjudgment.org. And we go through every single story. We go through it and understand this as well. People share their most intimate, most personal stories with us. And I appreciate it. I am forever grateful for that trust. And just because, for whatever reason, it doesn't make it onto our show, doesn't mean that it's not an incredibly powerful and important story to the person who told it to us. We're looking for some different things. We're looking for things that we want different parts of the world. We want different parts of the paranormal spectrum. We're looking for a lot of different things. And so just the act of sharing a story is just so powerful. And I know this is something that has been huge for me. Forget supernatural storytelling for a moment. Forget anything like that. Oftentimes, if you go on the street right now and you ask someone what their story is, what's your story? Hey, where do you come from? What's your story? They will tell you a story that is rooted in trauma, that ends in trauma, especially women. Their story ends in trauma. It ends with, and I'll say that even for myself. My own story might have ended. If I was to tell you my story, I'd tell you a story that ended with me screaming in a closet, telling everyone, hoping the bad stuff would go away. But through this magic of storytelling, much like Lopaka has said, you get to put yourself at the end where you want to be. You get to put yourself, maybe instead of leaving yourself in that closet, maybe you end that story with you in a position of power. Maybe you end that story with you in a position of understanding a little bit more. And telling your story to yourself in that way doesn't just change the story, it changes the person. It gives you control so that you're writing your own story and not letting trauma write it for you. And I don't know the psychological term for that, but it's power and it's control, and it's really, really important.
One thing I find with the stories that I tell is that I tell a story, and obviously the principles of being a good storyteller are pretty simple, really. Like, you really need a good beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, that's the basics, right? That are ridiculously important. And there's a lot of other tricks that we use, obviously, to draw people in and all that stuff. But the pillars, beginning, middle, and end, are super important. And I think a lot of times that when I am telling stories, that I give an ending, but not the ending, because stories always seem to grow. They seem to, like, they're living, breathing things as long as the person is still living, breathing. And then when someone else is telling that person's story, it still lives and breathes and grows. It's the thing with us that continues. At least the way I think of storytelling. What do you guys think about that?
Al, I can't agree more. And I think that, especially you and I, we both come from a public media background. And when you tell a public media background story, you have this beginning, middle, and you give that ending. Here's the ending. Here's what the story means. Here's the conclusion. But I have certainly found this is what happens. When you give a bow, people are meaning factories. They are always looking for meaning. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? If you tell someone what a story means, great. The brain gets it, the brain shuts down. Got it. But if you leave that open, if you don't tell someone what this story means, you just tell someone what happened to you, well, then your brain says, what's it mean? What's it mean? What's it mean? It's still trying to figure that out. That's a transfer process. That means now my story is yours. You're going to be cogitating on that for a lot different ways, a lot longer than if I said, here's the story, here's the package, here's what it means, it's about all said and done for you. Your brain doesn't like that stuff as much as it needs food. And real good storytelling is food. And this is the closest thing that we have to telepathy. The closest way I can get into Lopaka's head is to hear this story that he put me through, and then I'm thinking, what does that mean for me? If he tells a story about his stepfather, I'm thinking about my father. I'm thinking about how does his story relate to mine. It's different, but we certainly have that same touchstone. And I've been thinking about his father from the moment he told his story. And that's really important. I just think that's a key to storytelling.
Yeah.
For myself, it's something my mom told me. And a lot of what I know now, I learned literally sitting at my mom's feet. She said the process is called nohoakua. She said it's kind of a possession where the inspiration of the God sits on your shoulders and you become the vehicle. But she also said, if you can't take the people that you're telling the story to by the collar, shake them around, have your way with them, and throw them down and leave them spent, you didn't do a good job.
I'm going to adopt that.
but I was also a professional wrestler for about 17 years. So the process of that kind of storytelling was mainly meant to excite the people so much, get them so infuriated that they keep coming back for the story. And so back in the day, it wasn't about who won or who lost. It was about how many people could come and be part of the story. And then how are you going to end the story to make them come back the next time? So I think that was sort of ingrained in me, once I stopped wrestling and then just got into storytelling.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think our time has wrapped up here. Glynn, any last words?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you both for getting on about Spooked. We are so excited about this new season. We've got 22 episodes of original Spooked programming dropping right now on Luminary Media, and we just can't wait for everyone to hear it. Electrifying storytelling from around the globe. If you haven't heard Lopaka's story, you can get it everywhere. Just type in Spooked. Lopaka, tell us what you're up to right now.
Right now, we're doing virtual tours. We're doing live ghost stories on Friday nights.
Where can people find that online?
It's on Mysteries of Honolulu on Facebook, and our fan page, mysteries-of-hawaii.com.
Excellent.
And this past June 19th, to celebrate the passing of my boss, it was the anniversary of his passing, I told 100 ghost stories straight. So that was 6 hours straight, 100 ghost stories.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's on YouTube too. I couldn't believe that I sat still for 6 hours.
And
well, you had something to say.
Al Letson is the host of Reveal, and I can't believe you took this time to hear some of our goings on about ghost stories. Thank you very, very much, Al.
No,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
guys.
much.
And listen, listeners, please go to Luminary, click on this link, Spooked. And Glynn, what are they getting there?
You're going to get a link to a 30-day trial so you can hear storytelling. This is a special trial, only available right here, right now. Instead of the 7-day trial, you get a 30-day trial. So check it out, luminary.link/spooked, and hear the season, the brand new season, 22 episodes of Spooked, plus the 5 previous seasons, or the 4 previous seasons that already dropped. This is hours of paranormal storytelling, yours for the asking.
All right, guys. It was good to hang out with you.
Peace.
Take care.
All right.
Aloha.
Aloha.